people that were impacted by it. So, I'm not even sure Donald Trump has seen the whole documentary. This needs to be put in absolute context. And it's also very interesting that the BBC is constantly attacked by those on the right in the UK, because the BBC
Martin,
has. Go on.
No, I was just going to say. I think you make a really valid point that this needs to be seen in context, but I suppose people who see a one-sided depiction of President Trump and have only ever seen that one-sided depiction on the BBC, this feels like a smoking gun. This is a smoking gun. So whenever President Trump is talked about on the BBC for any time in the last 10 years, even before he was president, he's the butt of the joke. You look at Have I Got News for You? It's all about Orange Man Bad. It's a simplistic analysis of him. And I guess his frustration with that can now be somehow assuaged because he's got a cast iron example of where they've done it to him. And that's not really the behaviour of a bully. That's the behaviour of somebody that just wants some justice.
But Donald Trump lives and breathes that kind of criticism, though, Beverly. That's what he feeds off it. So, well, he probably does have to. And I am absolutely not the biggest fan of Donald Trump, but he has been elected as US president twice, so he has actually proved people and those naysayers wrong on two separate occasions. What we can't have is an institution like the BBC that is globally respected. And I'm not going to come on here and defend everything about the BBC. Because I've got my own personal criticisms of the BBC. I think their coverage of what's been happening in Israel and Gaza has been absolutely appalling. I hate the fact that they've had Nigel Farage on BBC Question Time 39 times, dozens of times more than any other political leader in the UK.
Why is that bad? Why is it? No, but genuinely, why is that bad?
Well, because that is not kind of fair and balanced. Why has Nigel Farage been on Question Time 38 times?
How many times would you like him to be on there?
Jeremy Corbyn, for example.
Balanced debate.
Jeremy Corbyn, for example, who was the Labour Party leader, has been on BBC Question Time twice. Okay, so when you compare it like that. Without the BBC, Nigel Farage arguably would not be where he is today. He has been elevated by the BBC across their news output. So it is quite interesting when the BBC is constantly attacked by those on the right of politics, because the BBC have played a big part in elevating those on the right in politics. So I suppose you need to be careful what you wish for.
But you see, yeah, but I think what you've just done there is that classic thing that I find so frustrating, and I don't even like the left-right distinction anymore, Martin. I don't think it even works anymore. I described you as a left-wing commentator, but I don't actually know a lot about you. I find you very interesting. I'd like you to come back on again. I've enjoyed this conversation. But what I'm saying is that when you're saying Nigel Farage has been on too much, you can't have too much of the alternative opinions. You can't have too much, because it's the only way we learn anything is to have both sides of every single conversation. That's why I like talking to people like you, because you might say we disagree. I think we probably agree on more than you realise.
But Nigel Farage has been on BBC Question Time about 30 times more than any other political leader. So, Nigel Farage is not the alternative opinion on the BBC.
I don't know whether that's true. I find that very hard to believe. He is the mainstream
opinion on the BBC. So, it is an interesting situation the BBC found it. What I think should happen with the BBC, basically, the people who pay for the BBC, ordinary licence fee payers, should, in my view, have real power in how it's run. Not politicians, not executives, not billionaires. We need democratic control of the BBC, and that should be the future of the BBC. We need to cherish it. I do think there's a place for media outlets like GB News, hence why I'm appearing on your show. But we can't end up in a situation like the US, where every single news outlet is either basically funded by billionaires or advertising revenue, which basically runs that particular outlet for a specific interest. The BBC is unique that it has this BBC clause where it has to have an impartiality. Doesn't always get it right, as I've outlined, it got it wrong with the Panorama
documentary. It never gets it right.
And they need to learn from that. But there needs to be root and branch reform of the BBC, and there needs to be much more democracy put into it.
But I think if you and I look at all the big issues across the country that affect the UK and what most British people like worry about at home now, illegal migration, we know the BBC romanticizes, is even sentimental about illegal migration. Everybody is a refugee fleeing a war zone, according to the BBC, and some of them absolutely are, but not as many as the BBC would have you suggest. The planet is dying entirely because of the behaviour of man and carbon emissions. We know that there are two sides to that particular story as well. The trans issue, the BBC have been very keen to point out that people born male, should be able to compete in women's sports and not pushed back on that. On all of these big issues, Martin, Brexit is another example. Brexit, all bad. There will be things that you and I agree on, actually. And weirdly, you mentioned Corbyn. There's a lot of stuff that Corbyn and Farage agree on these days, especially when it comes to things like digital ID and the surveillance state. There is so much more that people have in common than we realise. And unfortunately, the BBC has spent a lot of time brainwashing the public into seeing the world through this very narrow prism that they are right. They take the moral high ground, and anybody that disagrees with them on those major topics is wrong. And GB News has stepped into that space to give some balance to that. In no small part, thanks to people like you, Martin, coming to talk to us. So I really appreciate it. Let's talk again, my friend. Really appreciate that, Martin.
Appreciate
Abrahams there. Right, Greg and Laurie are still with me in the studio. Just briefly then, Laurie, the BBC and this idea of balance. The media is very different in the US. You've got very partisan right-wing channels. You've got very partisan left-wing channels. You don't really have anything in that middle space, do you?
No, but I would say that if this channel, which I consider more on the conservative side, if you were to question Donald Trump, or if you would have went into that White House briefing room today and questioned Caroline Leavitt in a way that she did not agree with, guarantee you they would have called you a left-wing propagandist, okay? Because that's what they do. That is the talking point. You're a left-wing radical, and that's not right. Just because you are pushing back or asking from a journalistic perspective for details or for the truth does not mean that you are a left-wing propaganda machine. I hope you would agree with that.
I think there's an element of truth to that, but I also do see that when Caroline Leavitt is pushing back on various channels, but they are still in the room. You have CNN there. You have the left-wing media in there. And she will go to them for questions. If it was...
But if they ask a question, does she then attacks them? Or Donald Trump will say, oh, you have low ratings, you're not even a real journalist, you're a piece of garbage, and call them names. And you know that that's true because he does it all the time.
When they're dishonest, he will call them out on it. So the president punches back. So I don't think he minds editorial opinions. That's fine. That's what newspapers and journalists do. It's just that when they lie, like the BBC did with that report, like the headlines that were completely deceiving today, I think he's going to call them out. So look, I think the president he's happy to have interviews with opposition journalists, as long as they're honest. And if they're honest, he'll sit with it.
But they're not opposition if they're asking a question. That is what a journalist does. They get to the facts.
But
if we didn't have journalism in this world, we wouldn't know any facts. We wouldn't have any truth to anything, right?
Yeah. Well,
so there you go.
In the UK.
But what's happened in the last 10 years is these media. New York Times is the most obvious example, but you can look at CNN the same way. They've gone from liberal bias, which we've always lived with on the right. And I got tired of Republican presidents saying, oh, the media is biased. Well, yeah, of course they are, and because they're typically very liberal. But now they've turned from bias to activism. And I think the BBC incident from last week, which we started talking about last Wednesday, I think that's a classic example of activism. They're willing to lie and deceive instead of being honest. Be honest with your opinions. That's fine.
Also, it's worth remembering that Joe Biden literally put restrictions and put pressure on Facebook for what they could allow on their social media sites. Like, we've had Zuckerberg come out and talk about it. That was a president who was determined for the world to be viewed in one particular way. And there's a transparency about this White House which is unprecedented. And in the press room, even the journalists from left-wing organisations, they might say, I'm not the biggest fan of Donald Trump, but he gives more time to the press than any other president.
But it's interesting that he was invited and sitting behind the president at inauguration, Bev. Come on now.
Okay.
Zuckerberg.
Well, let's move on. Let's move on. Still to come on The Late Show Live.
Because President Trump is in the Oval Office, but when Joe Biden was sitting in there, the Democrats never brought this up. This wasn't an issue that they cared about because they actually don't care about the victims in these cases.
The White House hits back after Democrats release emails that appear to link the American president with Jeffrey Epstein. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I am Bev Turner. So the White House has slammed American Democrats after they released new emails which appeared to link Donald Trump to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Have a look.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep. And this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room, so I will go ahead and say it, Virginia Giuffre. And it was CBS's own reporting, Ouija, that recently wrote that Miss Giuffre maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
So Caroline Levitt there putting on a strong defence of President Trump. One email alleged that Donald Trump spent hours with Giuffre, and another email addressed to Maxwell, Epstein wrote that Trump knew about the girls, referring to the American president as the dog that hasn't barked. Now, we'll explain to you what that means in just a minute. The American president wrote on Truth Social, the Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done the shutdown and on so many subjects. So let's talk to the White House correspondent at the Federalist, Brecon Thies. Brecon, always nice to see you. You were in the briefing room today, and it was inevitable, wasn't it, that the Epstein emails were going to be brought up repeatedly to Caroline Levitt to respond. But how damaging were these to Trump? Because looking at the front pages of the British press, they've gone very big on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the point of any of these kinds of stories trying to link Trump to Epstein or whatever. I mean, thus far, it just hasn't really worked because the goods haven't been there. I mean, literally right now we have Democrats trying to make the argument that Virginia Giuffre, who was victimized by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, is the person who apparently spent hours with Trump at Epstein's house, according to emails from Epstein. And that's kind of a key point. The problem with that claim is that Giuffre actually testified that she had never even seen Trump at Epstein's house. And as an employee of Mar-a-Lago, Giuffre also said that she had never even seen Trump do anything untoward there. Add to that, as Caroline Levitt mentioned, the reports that Trump actually kicked Epstein out for being what she called a creep, seducing teenage girls and things like that. I mean, the storyline doesn't make any sense. Basically, what we have, it seems, is that Democrats are shamelessly, number one, taking Epstein, who should have zero credibility, at his word, and then in doing so, inherently making the argument that Giuffre actually must have lied under oath. In order for any of this to make sense. And, unfortunately, Giuffre's no longer with us. She committed suicide earlier this year. So she's not here to tell any further her side of the story of this. I mean, I think, although the New York Times wrote this story with this misleading headline, even it didn't fall entirely for this kind of nonsense narrative, and it acknowledged Giuffre's testimony. But you would have to scroll 22 paragraphs down to find that, because after all, we are still talking about the New York Times.
Yeah, and this mention of President Trump being the dog that didn't bark, that's a Sherlock Holmes reference, Brecon, isn't it, to a murder in one of the books in which the dog doesn't bark, and so they know that the person who was murdered must have been murdered by the dog's owner, because otherwise the dog would have barked when the guy walked in. A clever kind of literary illusion. And in this instance, it appears to be saying that Donald Trump is the dog that hasn't barked, i.e. someone who could have raised the alarm but hasn't. What's your interpretation of that? Because that is open to various interpretations, that either he hasn't got anything to bark about because he hasn't seen anything, or that he's seen stuff but he hasn't raised the alarm, which is not something that Epstein would have wanted anyway. So what was your assessment of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that the entire context of any of what's going on here is actually here. And, we already know that Democrats are trying to hide things. I mean, they literally submitted all of this stuff with Virginia Giuffre's name redacted, because it was in fact Virginia Giuffre, and she's the one who basically exonerated Trump with her testimony. So, I don't know that we have all the information, to be quite honest with you. What's funny about this entire situation is that, these emails, I believe, are something like 14 years old, and we're led to believe, apparently, that with all the lawfare waged against Trump, raiding his house, all of the criminal investigations into him and people around him, and even just, good old-fashioned, campaign-related political opposition research, we're led to believe that none of this ever came up once. I mean, there's got to be more to the story about why that is. And, the Biden administration, even further, had control of all of this stuff for 4 years. The DOJ ostensibly had access to this for 4 years, and they had a campaign, a re-election campaign to run in 2024. And again, no words about this whatsoever. I mean, that is exceedingly hard to believe. I'm not really sure what we're supposed to do with the dog that doesn't bark information when it seems like maybe not all the information is there. And then on top of that, also, I mean, obviously Epstein had reason to try to, defend himself, and maybe he was making a paper trail. I'm just not really sure that we have all the information.
Yeah. Okay, Brecken, thank you so much. Brecken Thies there, the White House correspondent at The Federalist. Greg and Laurie are still here with me. Greg, what do you think the dog that doesn't bark means?
Nothing to it. I mean, Brecken brought up a point that I make often. If there was anything in the Epstein files, they would have come out in October 2024. As you said, that they tried everything else. They, fabricated a lot of lawfare against the president. They tried to keep him off the ballot in several states, like they did to some of their, even their own party. They were keeping, the primary candidates off the ballot in several states. So they're not afraid to use lawfare. They're not afraid to work elections in their favor, but going outside democratic norms. But for sure, if they had anything, it would have been out in October 24.
Laurie,
I'm
guessing you might have a different interpretation of this story.
Well, I'd like to correct her, for the record, her name is Virginia Giuffre, not as Brecken was calling her. So that's a point that is very important to get her name correct, because she is no longer with us.
Well, do you know what? Let me just say,
sure.
I've always, as a Brit, we obviously are very close to France, and we often will call her Virginia Giuffre. But in the UK, I've heard people say Giuffre as well, and Caroline Levitt today said Giuffre, Virginia Giuffre. So it's a little open to interpretation.
Okay. Yeah. But it was the White House and Donald Trump today who inserted her name as this redacted name, by the way. So that's what everyone is going off of. We don't know, because it is too soon, if that is the person, the victim, that they are referring to. He inserted that name today. And then now we're on this whole tangent of, she said this, stated many times and under oath. We don't know if that's the same person or not, or if it's a completely different person, and we're going to have to wait. So I think jumping to conclusions and going down this rabbit hole that it's her is false, and we should not do that until more information comes out.
Well, hang on a minute, because Caroline Levitt said many of you in this room have already reported who the redacted name is, so I am just going to repeat it as well. Yeah, so where did it first emerge?
If it was redacted, how could they know about it then?
But a lot of the media outlets have already corrected it, or at least they think they've corrected it. So I think there was some pushback on the headlines because it was so deceiving, and especially again after the BBC fiasco of last week. And so I think there was some sensitivity there, and so a lot of the outlets changed the headline already. BBC is not, because I just checked before the show, but many of them have, because of that correction. Now I don't know what the source was.
And the Democratic Party is the one who still, to this day, unequivocally will stand by. We are not going to release any of the names of these individuals, of these survivors or victims in this case, through our reporting. And you saw today, well, let's throw that out the window. Let's just throw out names. So I don't believe that.
I mean, Virginia Giuffre has written a whole book about it before she died.
Yes, but we are talking about the emails that were released today. The Democratic Party, the Democratic members of Congress will stand by and have stood by, and I agree with them, that they should keep those names redacted for privacy concerns, for their well-being, etc. And that's what the court document stated, is that they have to be kept under oath, sealed. And that's not happening.
Okay. Right, let me know at home what you think this evening, won't you? gbnews.com/your say. Still to come this evening on The Late Show Live.
And I'm telling you that if you don't get away from the green energy scam, your country is going to fail.
Is net zero all it was designed to be? New analysis raises some serious questions. Stay tuned for the details. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
And
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
To those who doubt whether Britain can have any impact on the pathway of global emissions, the lesson of history is that we can. Thanks to the power of our example, now nearly 60 countries in the world have similar legislation. In 2019, under Baroness May, the UK became the first major economy to legislate for net zero by 2050, supported by the Labour Party and parties across this House.
That was Energy Secretary Ed Miliband in July. Well, according to new research, things aren't working out so well for us in terms of net zero. The latest annual analysis from the Global Carbon Budget Project reveals that despite countries shifting to clean energy and renewables or net zero, global carbon emissions from fossil fuels will rise 1.1% this year. Now, the analysis shows that the shift to clean energy is insufficient to offset the rise in global energy demand. So is it time to abandon net zero? I'm joined by the head of policy at the Global Warming Policy Forum, Harry Wilkinson, and leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Evening, gentlemen. Ed, let me come to you first. You've done a sterling job for the last few years, Ed, in trying to convince the UK that there is money to be made in green energy and it's going to save us. Are you still right?
Definitely. And I mean, I think obviously this is a scientific report that we're using to get started with. So the fact that actually we're not doing as well as we should be doing globally doesn't take away from the opportunity for Britain in getting it done, showing the world how to do it and selling our wares to the rest of the world. I don't go with Ed Miliband's very altruistic way of looking at it. And he's very much looking at this this idea of us leading the world and showing by our great example. I think we should be leading the world and showing by our innovation, our industry, our growth, our financial prowess, and then selling on our products to all the rest of the world because we've done it, got there, innovated, solved the issue, and now we are the shop opened up for the rest of the world and selling to them. And in terms of figures, it potentially can put $1 trillion onto our economy in 2030. That's £20 billion a week. But take that when you had your 350 million a week for the NHS and we talked about Brexit. This is 60 times more in terms of potential.
Harry, sounds like a glowing commendation of net zero there that will make the country lots of money.
Well, I mean, I would love to believe this. I really would. It sounds so wonderful. But the reality is Britain is now labouring under the most expensive industrial electricity prices in the world. We're the second highest in terms of IEA members, in terms of domestic electricity bills. This is really a disaster. And all we've been doing is transferring those industrial activities from UK-based facilities. Those have been labouring under these high energy costs, and therefore we've been importing these products from abroad. So this isn't the kind of example that Ed Miliband or Ed Gemmill is talking about. All we've been seeing is us losing jobs and other countries gaining those jobs at our expense. And this is not the kind of climate change policies that we want to see. Of course, we want to reduce emissions. Of course, we want to tackle climate change where that's possible. But because we've looked at this in a very narrow sense, we've just increased costs here in the UK, and we've not been able to achieve those jobs. We've not been able to have that prosperity, and we've been suffering because of it.
Well, I have to say, where Harry and I actually agree.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say where Harry and I actually agree is we definitely don't want to outsource all of our jobs and our opportunities to China, which we've been doing for 40 years or whatever it is. That's still going on at the moment. Having said that, there is no connection whatsoever with net zero in that. And in fact, if we take net zero as coming in either 2008 when the Climate Change Act came in, or 2019 when actually we had the first use of the term net zero, but being nice about it, let's say 2008, the reduction in our the percentage of industry and manufacturing in our GDP has gone down by about 0.5% in that period. In the 15 years before that, it went down 11%. In the 20 years before that, it went down 11%. If there's any argument about net zero in industry, it's either slowing down our deindustrialization or it's reversing it. Having said that, we still agree with Harry that we prefer to have those jobs and those opportunities in this country rather than in China.
Let's bring in my panel if we can, because I do like to draw these comparisons on these big issues between the UK and the US and what lessons we could possibly learn. Laurie, let me come to you first on this. Donald Trump talks about drill, baby, drill, and is absolutely confident that that is the way to bring this country back to success, to really tap into your resources. We've got data centers all around the world that are demanding so much more power. AI, ironically, even though it's meant to be evolving, what that is doing is putting the brakes on the save the planet eco agenda, if you like, because because the data centers need so much power, and you can't do it in this country without coal, oil, gas.
Well, you also can't do it without water, which is a really big deal. I was actually on my way to COP30 in Brazil, but because of the shutdown, I was trying to make my way there twice this week, but because of flight issues, I didn't make it there, hence why I'm back on your program this week. But I do want to speak about, if you will allow me, not the US or not Great Britain. I want to talk about a country, for example, that is doing a lot. If you've ever been to India or been to Pakistan, you understand that you get out of the car and you can't breathe. The smog is so thick that you can't even breathe. So, for example, they've put in 11,000 polluting brick kilns, for example, were forced to convert to modern, clean, zigzag technology, increasing the compliance by up to 26%. Cars, a 3,000 increase in vehicle emission checks, which resulted in 260,000 vehicles being checked in just 24 and 25 alone. That's just one example of a country that has contributed to worldwide pollution, that is working on itself, and I think that that started under different administrations that were part of the Paris Climate Accord, etc., that were promoting and supporting and showing that they had will and supporting other countries in taking these actions and using the money for technology that will help the planet in general. And that's not happening anymore by a lot of countries because they don't see our president in this administration saying, we're going to continue that. They've kind of said, no, poo-poo, we're not going to do that anymore.
Greg?
Yeah, Ed Miliband, it's like it's 2021 again. I mean, I think the world has changed. Bill Gates came around last week and kind of came clean and being a lot more reasonable and a lot using common sense for a change. And so look, this thing has been a failure. We've seen it blue state, red state here in America. Gasoline is at $5 a gallon in California, where Governor Newsom has Ed Miliband kind of, net zero policies and EV mandates and all this other nonsense. And the average price of gasoline is now below $3 a gallon on average. That would be roughly $1 for a liter of petrol in the UK. And I think the price is probably £1.50.
But wouldn't that be wonderful, Ed, in a word? Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well, to be honest, no. And in the UK, it's tidal power, baby, tidal power, and we've got to do it. And one of the reasons we're not ahead on all of this is because we haven't been doing it for the last 40 years. The quote about Bill Gates, in any case, was wrong. Having read the report, he was talking about the foreseeable future. He didn't say things wouldn't happen eventually.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Harry Wilkinson and Ed Gemmell, thank you both so much for joining me so late from the UK. Right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to look at tomorrow's front pages before they hit the shelves, only on GB News.
GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
One of the funniest moments in any cabinet meeting, President Trump had them bring in a full-size picture of himself with Putin, and when they were in Hawaii, and he's very tall and Putin was very short. Putin came up to about here, and he said, you know what I said to him? He said, I've had it up to here with you.
That was Bobby Kennedy Jr. there revealing what happens behind the scenes of high-state meetings with President Donald Trump. Now, let's dive into some of the main stories on the front of tomorrow's newspapers. The Guardian. He knew all about the girls. Epstein messages pile pressure on Trump. That is the Guardian's interpretation. Probably not a coincidence that they're running this on the week that the BBC is at war with Donald Trump. The Daily Mail. Ousting the Prime Minister will trigger an election, Starmer's allies are warning. We're going to get into that in just a minute. Daily Telegraph, Wes Streeting going to war with Number 10. Quite a flattering picture of Wes Streeting on the front page of the Telegraph there, looking quite dynamic. New slimmed down Wes Streeting suggests the Daily Telegraph are up to mischief, making him look like an appealing Prime Minister. Let's get the take of GB News contributor and comedian Stephen N. Allen. Steve Allen, now down the line in GB News studio. Steve, great to see you. Now, what should we talk about? The mess that Starmer's in, perhaps, and Wes Streeting snapping at his heels?
Why not? Because now we know that Wes Streeting is snapping at his heels. We didn't know this until Number 10 decided to move against him. It's weird, isn't it? They've created this problem. Maybe there were plots, and we probably wouldn't have found out about them until after the budget, which is the way things were meant to be. But what they've done is tried to use like a strong tactic, get in there and sort it out. And all that's happened is they've got in there and raised this prospect of Wes Streeting or others. Apparently there's briefing against loads of other high figures who might be trying to plot to replace Starmer. And it's not worked. Instead of weakening all of the people who might stand against him, now we just see that Starmer looks weak. So, yeah, on the front page, Streeting goes to war with Number 10 because apparently some of Wes Streeting's people are saying they knew exactly what they were doing, whilst in the interviews Wes Streeting was playing it down, saying, oh, I'm sure Starmer had nothing to do with this. But it looks like people knew what was going on. And it's not a position of strength at all, isn't it? And that's worrying when you're going into a budget that's not going to be fun.
This is interesting, though, this idea that ousting the Prime Minister would trigger an election. I'm not sure that's strictly true, is it, Steve, in the UK? What's this based on? The warning followed a chaotic day in which Downing Street bid to kneecap potential rival Wes Streeting. I don't think, well, I was going to say, is the country ready for a general election? Are we ready for a general election, Steve?
Do you know what? I mean, lots of coverage says that we can't wait to have one. I'm not sure it would help the situation. And I think what it is, although it's a headline on the front page of the Daily Mail, it's more of a warning to everyone who's a Labour MP. Because as much as they love to be disgruntled, as much as they love to vote in a way that continues to make spending their main priority, the point is, if you go for Starmer, you'll lose everything. That's the warning, whether it's based on truth or not. Because they have a very weird system where you need 80 MPs to then write a letter to say we don't have confidence in Starmer, then the ball starts rolling at that. The questions are not only who would replace him, but then who would be in the position of being the Chancellor of the Exchequer, because the one thing Rachel Reeves has got going for her is that whenever anyone talks anything about her, the markets panic. When she cried in the House of Parliament, the bond markets decided to absolutely get terrified by it, because the fear of who would be in place next and how profligate they would be. So until we know who those people would be, maybe there's no other option. You have to stick with Starmer.
Let's bring in my panel here. Let's bring Greg and Laurie into this debate, Steve. Now, Greg, you spend a lot of time in the UK. If this was to trigger an election, I think the argument being that the British public would feel that they haven't, they're not being serviced by someone they haven't voted for, and that might trigger an election. I tell you, who's not ready for an election? Nigel Farage.
Yeah,
he's not ready yet.
I think it would be better a year from now. But I do think that Labour would be taking a major risk if they were to trigger a general election. But what's interesting, you know, we had 5 Conservative PMs in 6 years, and they didn't trigger elections. So I'm not sure what he's talking about.
That's very true. I'm afraid we've run out of time for that little section, Steve, but please stay with us. We will be talking to you a whole lot more in the next hour, because still to come, this panel is desperate to revisit the net.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through today there'll be a bit of a three-way split when it comes to our weather. Cold in the north with a few wintry showers, very mild with a lot of fine weather across southern parts. In between, however, it's a much wetter story. Some persistent and quite heavy rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England through this morning. The rain breaking up and easing a little bit as we head into the afternoon. Across Scotland, like I say, there will be some showers around, could be falling as sleet or snow, but also some sunny spells. A chilly feel here though, temperatures struggling. Meanwhile, across central and southern England, well, lots of fine sunny weather to be had and temperatures well above average for the time of year, feeling, well, relatively warm in the sunshine for some. As we go into the evening, sticking with the chilly feel across parts of Scotland, a bit of frost developing quite quickly as we go overnight, and also a few more showers, some still falling as sleet or snow. Across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, staying pretty cloudy. There will be a few outbreaks of rain at times as well, not as heavier as they will have been during the daytime. And then further south, well, central parts of England and Wales ending the day largely fine, but rain persistent and heavy pushing into some southern counties and then feeding further northwards as we go overnight. Now, it is going to be quite heavy. We could see some rainfall totals building up for some places, but across the northern half of the UK, staying drier with some clearer skies across parts of Scotland, so temperatures dropping even further. Could get as low as -4, -5 Celsius in some places, much milder where we have the cloud and rain further south. That rain's going to continue then for many places across England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. It could be quite heavy, particularly across the hills and mountains towards the south of Wales. High rainfall totals, perhaps up to 100 millimetres, could cause some impacts, particularly around some east-facing slopes. Further north, staying bright and fine, just a few showers to watch out for. Chilly here, much milder towards the south, but unpleasant in the wind and rain.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
No, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country. There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor. Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News in the White House today, and I've got a panel who are desperate to get back into that net zero debate. Don't go anywhere. On The Late Show Live tonight.
The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain.
I was at the White House earlier today, just down the road, on behalf of GB News, and I got to ask the President's press secretary about him suing the BBC over this now world-famous doctored panorama clip. The message was clear. The President is not going to back down. They've got until Friday to respond, and according to reports this evening, the BBC will apologise. But will that be enough? Also tonight.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong.
Donald Trump and the White House were totally unflustered today by the latest Jeffrey Epstein emails in which the deceased paedophile and Ghislaine Maxwell mentioned Trump. This hasn't stopped his political opponents, of course, continuing to weaponise these emails. We're going to be diving headfirst into the stories from tomorrow's papers, hours before they hit the shelves. We are live in Washington, D.C., just yards from the White House, bringing you the stories that America is talking about and that matter to Britain too, including this.
This is men's fragrance. Yeah. This is good. It's good. No. It's something.
If you're listening on the radio, that's President Trump spraying perfume on the president of Syria, and he made, I thought, was a hilarious joke. He always says what you probably shouldn't say in the room, doesn't he? We'll tell you what that was in just a minute. I'm Bev Turner. This is The Late Show Live. Welcome to the second hour. We've got all the stories you're going to be talking about later today. More debates and zero ad breaks. Don't go anywhere. Let's get back to our very top story. Now today, GB News appeared on the world stage in front of the international media. I represented the channel and you, of course, the viewers at home, in front of the American president's press secretary. I asked Caroline Levitt about the biggest story in this country right now, Donald Trump suing the BBC over a doctored speech, what he calls fake news. Here's what happened. Does this strain the relationship between the president and the prime minister? And given that the organisation is publicly funded, is the president prepared to bankrupt the BBC?
Well, thank you, Bev. There's a lot of questions in one there. I will say I know the president has a very good relationship with Prime Minister Starmer. You have been there. You've seen them in their interactions. You've questioned both leaders in your time joining us when we've gone to the United Kingdom a few different times now. However, he has always been very frank when he disagrees with leaders, even whom he has a good relationship with. And the BBC, being a fair news organization, is definitely an outlet. I think these two leaders would disagree. The president has made it very clear that this is a leftist propaganda machine that is unfortunately subsidized by British taxpayers, and he thinks that's extremely unfortunate for the great people of the United Kingdom and Great Britain. And I think that the president was deeply concerned by the editing, the purposeful and dishonest editing of his speech that was so clearly fake news. And he rightfully dubbed that term many years ago. And this is a classic example of that. We see it in the United States all the time. We see it now in the United Kingdom. As you know, the president's external legal counsel has filed a lawsuit against the BBC. We expect that to continue. And whether they apologize or not is up to them. Thanks for being here, Bev.
So the BBC has until Friday evening to respond to Donald Trump's writ. In it, of course, he's demanded an apology, a retraction and a sum of money, saying that he'll pursue $1 billion. Well, tonight there are reports that Chair of the BBC, Sameh Shah, is expected to offer the President a personal apology. So before we get to my first guest, let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Greg and Laurie are still with me, but let's talk to, he's a wonderful counter voice. Always enjoy our interactions. Matthew Stadland, thank you for joining me on this. Right, so your assessment of Caroline Levitt today, you know, she could have gone further, I thought, Matt. I thought she was quite polite. She said it won't affect the relationship with Starmer, but the President doesn't mind disagreeing with other leaders, and he doesn't mind saying when he disagrees with them, but that they do want to see justice here. What's going to happen, Matt?
Bev, you know, you and I go back a long way, don't we? We've worked for the same broadcaster in the past. Surely there must be some sort of pinch me moments you're experiencing at the moment, because in one sense it's extraordinary what you're achieving there. You're in the White House, you're asking the first question in a press briefing or a press meeting with the President of the United States, most powerful man in the world, press secretary. That is, by any standards, a sort of remarkable thing. So in a sense, kudos to you. However, there is a different perspective on this as well. And you heard Caroline Levitt there in her answer to your question, and it's a scoop that you got. You heard her talk about the BBC effectively as a sort of lefty propaganda channel or broadcaster. The irony is that some of your own coverage of this issue is almost as though you are working as part of Donald Trump's personal PR team. And I saw the clip on social media earlier, long before I knew I was going to be invited to talk about this with you. And it did sort of send a chill down my spine, because you are a British journalist, and it felt to me that you were egging on a foreign president, in this case the most powerful man in the world, and also a critical ally of your country, of my country, of the country of many of our viewers and listeners. You were almost egging on the president to split in some way with our Prime Minister. Now, you may not like Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer is very unpopular, but nonetheless, you are a Brit abroad, and it felt to me as though you were egging on Caroline Levitt to say that somehow this BBC Storm story is going to create a rift between our Prime Minister and the President of America.
Let me tell you who I care more about than the Prime Minister. I care more about the British people than I care about the feelings of the Prime Minister. And what I've seen from the BBC is that it is shortchanging the British public. And when I say that, I mean specifically BBC News. I think the BBC is a phenomenal institution of which we should be very proud. And I had been very proud of that for decades, my entire life, until about 2020. And then when I tapped into the amount of brainwashing they were doing with the British public during that period of time, spring 2020 onwards, I started to look at the BBC through a very different guise. And from that point onwards, I realised that every story they were giving us as a fait accompli, as fact, there were two sides to that story. And so my job there in that room is not to compliment President Trump, it's not to compliment Keir Starmer in any way. It's to represent the British public who watch GB News. Because you know why they watch GB News, Matt? Because they've got tired of being lied to by the BBC. And you know what? They want to see you and me, not always you, but they want to see you and me have these debates. I can't lie about that. They do. That's why they watch GB News, because we make them think. And do you know what I would never get invited onto, Matthew? I would never get invited onto the BBC to have this conversation. And neither would Patrick Christie's, neither would Michelle Dewberry, you know, neither would Nana, neither would Andrew Pearce. Like, these people who host on GB News, we don't get invited onto the BBC, but we would happily have all voices from the BBC on this channel to have this debate. So do you see where that partisan approach from the BBC, do you see that it is real, that they are not impartial?
So I wasn't suggesting that you should be particularly concerned for Keir Starmer's personal feelings. I'm not particularly concerned for Keir Starmer's personal feelings. I voted for this Labour government. It hasn't so far turned out to be a success. It's clearly very unpopular. I've never actually met Keir Starmer. What I was concerned about is the idea that a British journalist, and now very prominent British journalist in the shape of you, Bev Turner, was, it seemed to me, seeking to drive a wedge between our Prime Minister and the President of the United States. And as you know, the special relationship is very, very important. Now, onto the issue of the BBC. Clearly, GB News has an audience. It's 1:10 in London. I should be asleep. I'm talking to you partly because GB News does indeed have an audience. In fact, I was on the other night, and the next morning someone came up to me in the street and wanted to have a debate with me because he'd seen me on this show or the equivalent. People come up to me at football games, at cricket games, all over the place, and they recognise me from GB News, and the vast majority of them are very polite. They realise why I'm on the channel. They think it's important to have debate. So GB News clearly has an audience. It has nothing like the BBC's audience, of course, the 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, 10 o'clock news, and so forth. No reason why it should.
Not yet.
But GB News has a vested interest, Bev, in tearing strips out of the BBC, a commercial interest, perhaps a political interest as well. And so does the Telegraph. If the BBC website didn't exist, then arguably many more people would read and consume news on the Telegraph. As a left-leaning person, I certainly spend more time on the Telegraph website than I do on the Guardian, because I want to get a sense of what people with different views to me are thinking. But what I'm saying is, there seems to have been almost coordinated or concerted effort by some media organisations in the UK, and perhaps some political figures and political commentators in the UK, to tear down the BBC. And what I would say in the defence of the BBC is, yes, on this particular Trump story, out of thousands and thousands of reports that the BBC must have done into Trump online and on the radio and on television, this particular story, whoever was in charge of it got it wrong. I don't believe, and I may be wrong, I can't prove this to you, I don't believe it was a cynical attempt to misrepresent Donald Trump. I just think it was bad journalism. I think it was likely just a very poor judgment. However, on that fateful day, as you know, because I've said it before, Donald Trump, in a very, very febrile atmosphere, was indeed encouraging his supporters to march on the Capitol and to protest against democracy.
Well, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go into the details of January the 6th, because I think the story is not about that, Matt. I think it's about the media's portrayal and particularly what happens now with the BBC, because I've been so disappointed with the response of the BBC. I don't actually want to see the end of the BBC. GB News is a completely separate proposition to the BBC. We will survive with or without the BBC. It won't really make any difference to us. As you say, BBC has a lot more viewers than us, mainly because you have to go much further down your TV to find us, and you've really got to want to do it. What tends to happen is people find us and they stay with us all day, and that's wonderful, and we love those people. But I'm all right. I'm okay with the BBC existing, but I want it to offer fair, two-sided journalism, because I don't think the British people are stupid, and we can take all sorts of issues, as we've said, the biggest issues of any particular day. I mean, the BBC wrote this piece, and somebody reminded me of it online yesterday, which I'd completely forgotten. It was a piece on the news and on the website about the fact that trans men were breastfeeding babies, and the science had proven that trans men's breastfed mucus, their the mucus that their breasts were producing was as good as women's breast milk. That is the kind of nonsense that the BBC has been responsible for that you would never see on GB News. And that's why people are finding us. I want the BBC to exist. I just don't want it to peddle such absolute nonsense.
I can't speak to that particular article, and I don't particularly want to revisit the pandemic now because that deserves proper attention. And one of the things that I hope the COVID inquiry will look into, if it hasn't already, is how mainstream media outlets, as well as social media, covered the pandemic and the issues that arose, vaccinations, lockdowns, and so forth. And I think it was a really difficult time for broadcasters because this was, within our lifetimes, unprecedented. And the risks of mis and disinformation and anti-science at that time could potentially have been lethal and also damaging to the economy, damaging to schools if they were going to continue to be locked down. Look, we could have a whole debate about that. But just on the issue, there, more broadly of the BBC, any of the viewers who are consuming GB News now in the UK can watch programmes like Question Time, they can watch programmes like Newsnight and so forth, and they can judge for themselves as to whether they feel that the political spectrum of our elected representatives, of MPs, is properly represented. And actually, Bev, one thing that I think they might find is that Reform get far more airtime than their MPs, the number of their MPs would merit. That's because at the moment they only have 5 MPs. But I think, rightly probably, the BBC gives them far more of a percentage than 5 MPs is as a percentage of the 650 MPs in the House of Commons. Why do they do that? Because they are consistently 10% ahead in the polls. So if you look at the BBC's political coverage of party politics, I think you'd probably struggle. It might not be perfect, and where it's not perfect, it should be made as perfect as humanly possible. But I think you would struggle to find bias.
I think the reason that the Reform packs more punch, actually, than it should do, you're right, it has way more clout than the number of MPs should dictate. But that's pretty much because Starmer can't stop mentioning Nigel Farage. Every time Kemi Badenoch opens her mouth, she talks about Nigel Farage. And therefore the BBC have to cover Reform because the other politicians and the Prime Minister can't stop talking about them. But Matthew, it's always nice to see you. Thank you so much for staying up.
Bev, I think the reason they get I think the reason they get that airtime is, as I've said, look, you can make comments about Starmer and whether it tactically or not and strategically he should be mentioning Farage as much as he sometimes does. No, I think the reason they get the airtime on the BBC is because the BBC recognises, as an impartial broadcaster, that although they've only got 5 MPs, they are consistently ahead in the polls.
Yeah. They're having to recognise that now. But I think it's probably quite reluctant, and I don't think they can take any credit for the success of Reform. But Matt, we will talk another day, no doubt. Good night, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me. Right, Greg and Laurie are still here with me this evening. Oh, Greg, let me come to you then on that debate.
Yeah, it's exhausting because I think there's a lot of things. I mean, Matt's a great guy, and I think he's good to have on the program, obviously, and that's very good of GB News to have opposition people on all the time.
It's what we do all the time, contrary to public opinion.
Of course, and so, but where I think one mistake was he said as an impartial broadcaster. They're not impartial. I love the BBC. I love appearing on the BBC. I never say no, and good for them. Several of the BBC assets called me this week about their story.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great that they were honest enough.
Well, they tend to watch GB News now and nick our guests.
That's right. They pay more.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
But I do think
our money,
taxpayer money, of course. Yeah, I feel guilty now.
Yeah, don't.
But look, I think we all want the BBC to survive, but they are not impartial, and you see that not just with the big stories like the one that broke last week in the Telegraph, but just every day, and it's always, if it's a liberal guest and a conservative guest, it's usually 2 against 1, and then of course the presenter is a person of the left. So it's like you're at a dinner party in Islington.
It is. But the only thing I would say against that, Greg, is that during the pandemic, and we've had a Conservative government for 14 years, they were the Conservative mouthpiece as well. You know, they seem to be on the hotline to number 10 all the time. Yeah. What does the Prime Minister want us to say? And therefore, that's what we will say.
Right.
And do you know what I mean?
Collusion.
So I don't see them necessarily. I know they now appear to be, I don't like left and right. I just don't think it works anymore. But it is of some value in this debate. Yeah. I don't see them necessarily as being left-wing. They're just pro whoever's in number 10, it seems to me.
There could be some of that, because I do think there was a lot of collusion between the BBC and the government during the lockdowns, just like there was in America.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that was very troubling, that, you know, it's not just politics. You know, okay, I could criticize, you know, the networks for censoring the Hunter Biden laptop, but it was much worse when they were censoring the Great Barrington Declaration, because that affected a lot more people. And let's face it, you know, the Hunter laptop was for a lot of political junkies like myself who follow this stuff. But the Great Barrington Declaration should not have been censored by any network.
That was 100 of global scientists and doctors who said at the start of the pandemic you need to protect the vulnerable and let the young go free. That was effectively, which has now been proven to be right. Laurie, your assessment of that as an American, when you hear two Brits debating about the BBC, here in America, is it still trusted?
I think absolutely it's still trusted. I consider them to be one of the most reputable news sources in the world, and I hope they continue to be so. And they're going to take a hit from this. They have all, for the last, you know, over a week now, that's all that I've been seeing on headlines, and calls for people to resign, calls for a shakeup within the editorial, within the, you know, maybe producers, etc., needing to go. But this is what happens. There's shakeups, and when, you know, you shake the tree and the bad apples fall, you need to get rid of them, right? But I would say here in the United States, it's not state-run media, but you see Donald Trump, he only chooses to go on Fox News, whether to make announcements about things, whether... Yes, it is. When he has major announcements, he goes to Fox News. He just had Laura Ingraham in the White House interviewing about his plans with the East Wing, and she was asking him, you know, oh, is this from Home Depot? And he shut her down. You know what I mean? There's things like that, but he still continually chooses to go to very specific, mostly Fox News, to people who are very friendly. And when he gets questioned from, like, Norah O'Donnell, for example, on 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago, he attacked her.
But hang on, so
I don't like that. I like things to be fair and balanced, Bev, but when you do that to a very reputable, credible journalist, it's not necessary.
For our British audience, that second interview you referenced there, 60 Minutes, if you could just, that's a more left-leaning channel. Was it MSNBC? Who was it? Was it MSNBC?
No, it was CBS, which is 60 Minutes, which is, in my opinion, one of the best programs and shows in the United States of America that is fair and balanced. I do stand by that. They do the most in-depth reporting. I do not find it skewed. Yes, Donald Trump was able to sue over that piece about Kamala Harris. Did I agree with that? No.
So are they proudly
that.
left-leaning? Or is it a proudly democratic channel, CBS?
I would not say yes.
I think we can all agree that they are people of the left. You know, whether they spend all of their time criticizing people of the right, no, of course not. You know, they do some in-depth reporting, which is great, but they are clearly a left-leaning organization. They used to be reputable. Everybody used to watch 60 Minutes. You'd watch football, NFL football on Sundays, and you know, 60 Minutes would be on after the last CBS game. It was a real American tradition, and they absolutely blew themselves up probably a generation ago with the bias. People just stopped watching it, or at least many people stopped watching it.
Where does this bias come from, though, with the media in America? Is it just because it is funded by people who are politically ideological?
Well, I disagree with everything that he just said, because I don't think that there's a bias. I think that journalists,
But you would agree that Fox is biased?
Yes, in a lot of ways, because they decide not to cover certain things. And I'll give you an example. Over in the UK, when Trump recently went there to visit, I'd never seen as many protesters, not even as many here in the United States, you know, with balloons and making sure that they were front and center so he could see them, you know, along the way with his motorcade, of just how much they have disdain for our president. And
in the UK?
Yes, and the BBC was covering that, right?
I was there.
Yeah,
I was there.
Yeah.
I was literally in the motorcade. Yeah. And so that's the point. If you look at the BBC, there was about 10 people on the road, I think, in Scotland at one point. And but the rest of them were holding up pro-Donald Trump placards and MAGA hats and waving American flags. And then I looked at the BBC website and they depicted it like it was a protest.
That was the point I was trying to make, was here in the US, when we are reading the BBC, it appears that it's a lot more.
Right.
So what I'm saying is here in the US, when we have No Kings protests, for example, big on the mall and across the entire country.
Which is an anti-Trump protest.
No, it's anti-fascism, not just against Donald Trump, it's against his policies and what he's doing to the United States of America. Then Fox News was not covering that the same as other networks. So again, could you say, oh, well, these are left-leaning because they're covering what's actually happening on the ground in America? I would say that's, again, not fair to say.
OK, right, lot to think about there. gbnews.com/your say. Still to come on The Late Show Live, this.
This is men's fragrance, right? Yeah. This is what, it's that thing.
I promise you we'll show you that soon. We have been trailing it. That's Donald Trump spraying perfume on the Syrian president and making a few jokes at their expense. Also, House Democrats have released a new batch of Epstein emails. We'll have the latest details. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. So the president has hit back at House Democrats after the release of new emails which appear to link him to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Writing on Truth Social, the president has said the Democrats are using the Jeffrey Epstein hoax to try and deflect from their massive failures, in particular their most recent one, the shutdown. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke earlier today.
This entire thing, again, it's not a coincidence to the American people at home. There are no coincidences in Washington, D.C., and it is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government. This is another distraction campaign by the Democrat in the liberal media, and it's why I'm being asked questions about Epstein instead of the government reopening because of Republicans and President Trump.
Let's talk to White House reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester, now. Julia, good evening. Thank you very much for joining The Late Show Live. So, as Caroline Leavitt said, this is just a distraction. We've got more important things to talk about. Do we know why these emails get leaked in these on the timings of them? Because there does seem to be something a little bit mischievous about them.
Well, a lot is going on in here in Washington today. As you know, Bev, of course, you have the House that just passed that government funding bill, which President Trump is set to sign in just over an hour's time at the White House. But that is sort of connected to the Epstein saga, if you will, because we know that Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva was the last remaining Republican or Democratic vote, that would essentially bring the group of lawmakers who are essentially pushing for that discharge petition to pass. Her getting sworn in earlier today, which is related to everyone coming into Washington to reopen the government, that's what triggered this discharge petition, which Mike Johnson says will be voted on by the entire chamber next week. So, I think the White House wants to move on from this Epstein saga. It's something that President Trump is constantly asked about, but we have Democrats, congressional Democrats, bringing it up on a daily basis, and it's become a big story on Capitol Hill. So the White House is forced to be asked about this. In fact, when President Trump signs that funding bill in just over an hour's time, he'll likely be asked about this, if reporters are able to ask questions. So I think the White House would like to change the subject as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. Let me bring in my guest, Greg Swenson, and I believe your friend, Laurie Watkins, is also here, Julia. So, Greg, would you explain to our British viewers who aren't familiar with this shutdown? It's complicated. What has happened now? Just in the most simplistic terms, if you wouldn't mind.
The short version is there was a continuing resolution, which basically means that the government agrees to continue funding, or the Congress agrees to continue funding the government. It was a so-called clean CR. It was pretty standard operating procedure. The Democrats in many ways wanted to relitigate some past issues like the extension of the Obamacare subsidies. Good for them, that's what they care about. This probably wasn't the right time to do it. It ended up failing, and so after 41 days, the Democrats essentially got the same deal with a couple of things at the margins, the same deal they could have signed 41 days ago. So I think it was a failure. They wanted to have some distractions today, thus the emails being released. But I don't think it's a great moment for a functioning government, because literally the government was shut down for 41 days.
Laurie, is that embarrassing then that the Democrats held the Republicans to ransom and then in the end had to just concede?
Absolutely not. It is not embarrassing. And my colleague Greg said that's only what the Democrats care about. I'm sorry, you don't care about, as a Republican, the Conservative Party doesn't care about people in America having health care. The 44 million people are going to receive increases in their health insurance. I just got off the phone with my agent yesterday, and my plan, because I am self-employed and I employ other people as a small business owner, is going to go up by more than double every single month. That's starting January 1st. So yeah, I do care about that. This isn't just a Democratic issue. Democrats are standing up for health care, making sure that it's preserved for Americans across the board, as well as SNAP benefits, as well as making sure that government workers get paid. And now we have some movement on this, but I don't know if you saw the headlines, that now the Republicans are saying, if you want to take up health care, we're now going to make sure that you can't, we're going to take away more women's rights as far as funding health care for them, as far as paying for abortions is what they're calling it, etc., which is absolutely ridiculous. So if it's not one thing, it's the other. And it's constantly going after the American people, and what they deserve is to be healthy and to be happy, and they are not doing any of that. Greg, they're making life miserable for American people right now.
Not true, but that's quite a rant. But I think that the time to do that is when you're arguing over legislation, which they did in the spring. The bill, the big beautiful bill, was passed. They did not have the continuing Obamacare subsidies that were put in place as emergency measures during the COVID lockdown. So, it was almost an excuse to throw more money at a problem where premiums have in fact gone up quite a bit since Obamacare started 15 years ago, 14, 15 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, look, there's plenty of debate that can be accomplished. We can accomplish a lot with debate, and I think we'll see more of that on healthcare. You'll see Republican proposals on healthcare, but the time to do that is with legislation, not during a continuing resolution and shutting down the government, including food stamps, which was really horrible that the Democrats did that.
I find it so interesting, though, in terms of when people talk about this administration being kind of anti-women and sort of particularly in terms of healthcare, Julia, and you saw Robert Kennedy on stage, I think it was yesterday or day before, at the Centre for Health and Human Services, where he was announcing that he was going to make HRT and hormone replacement therapy more accessible for women, and taking off these warnings from the box. And it was such a pro-women day with lots of women there. It didn't get a mention barely in any of the newspapers or any of the websites. Why is that?
Well, it's interesting because we actually saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr. along with Vice President J.D. Vance and a number of other administration officials on stage today at the MAHA Summit, or the Make America Great Again, or Healthy Again, excuse me, Summit in Washington, D.C. But you're right, the hormone replacement story did not get a lot of traction in American media. I think maybe some of that could be due to the fact that there's just so much going on in the news cycle now between the Epstein files, the government shutdown, flight delays, etc. But at the same time, I think, in 2025, when we talk about this issue, women's issues, a lot of it oftentimes does go back to this issue of abortion access in the country and how it relates to President Trump. We know that President Trump in many ways was able to influence the Supreme Court, not in an unethical way, but he was able to get conservative justices onto the Supreme Court, which led to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So now there's this question of, how can American women access abortion if needed in this country. So I think oftentimes we hear that debate in that prism, but it's interesting to hear, sort of some of these new ideas floated by the Make America Healthy Again movement. I would say there's certainly there's conservative principles, obviously, in that movement, but there's some crossover, I think, in that movement with liberals as well. But when it comes to women's health, I think in the media narrative, it's normally dominated by this issue of abortion access and reproductive health care.
Yeah, Laurie, you must feel grateful to Bobby Kennedy to have brought HRT for women centre stage of the health debate and to improve access for women, surely.
Well, there's a difference, Bev, that I see. Sure, this should be more accessible. I'm all for that. But lowering the standards so it becomes unsafe, that's what I have a problem with. So the devil is in the details, and I want to see what this policy is actually going to do to help more women in this country.
Well, my understanding was that he basically had said that women are being let down and shortchanged because you've been told for decades this is dangerous, but actually if you look at the proper data, you look at the evidence base, he said you do not need to have these sorts of warnings. He's done a deep dive into the research and said, women, you deserve better. But of course, the Republicans never get depicted in that way, do they? Julia, thank you so much. White House reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester there. We were supposed to talk about Epstein there, but it obviously took a bit of a swervy path there. We don't mind. That's what we do here on The Late Show Live. There's always interesting topics to talk about. I want to hear from you as well this evening. gbnews.com/your say. Still to come this evening on The Late Show Live.
Who's the funniest guy on the cabinet? Well, obviously.
Find out who the funniest member of Donald Trump's administration is, but also tonight we're going to look at the biggest headlines on tomorrow's front pages. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through today there'll be a bit of a three-way split when it comes to our weather. Cold in the north with a few wintry showers, very mild with a lot of fine weather across southern parts. In between, however, it's a much wetter story. Some persistent and quite heavy rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England through this morning. The rain breaking up and easing a little bit as we head into the afternoon. Across Scotland, like I said, there will be some showers around, could be falling as sleet or snow, but also some sunny spells. A chilly feel here though, temperatures struggling. Meanwhile, across central and southern England, well, lots of fine sunny weather to be had and temperatures well above average for the time of year, feeling, well, relatively warm in the sunshine for some. As we go into the evening, sticking with the chilly feel across parts of Scotland, a bit of frost developing quite quickly as we go overnight, and also a few more showers, some still falling as sleet or snow. Across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, staying pretty cloudy. There will be a few outbreaks of rain at times as well, not as heavier as they will have been during the daytime. And then further south, well, central parts of England and Wales ending the day largely fine, but rain persistent and heavy pushing into some southern counties and then feeding further northwards as we go overnight. Now, it is going to be quite heavy. We could see some rainfall totals building up for some places, but across the northern half of the UK, staying drier with some clearer skies across parts of Scotland, so temperatures dropping even further. Could get as low as -4, -5 Celsius in some places, much milder where we have the cloud and rain further south. That rain's going to continue then for many places across England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. It could be quite heavy, particularly across the hills and mountains towards the south of Wales. High rainfall totals, perhaps up to 100 millimetres, could cause some impacts, particularly around some east-facing slopes. Further north, staying bright and fine, just a few showers to watch out for. Chilly here, much milder towards the south, but unpleasant in the wind and rain.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Funniest guy on the cabinet. Well, obviously, the President of the United States. I mean, so beside him, I mean, look, we all have different views on this. My personal vote for funniest person outside the president is probably Marco. Yeah, Marco. He has an incredible sense of humor. He's got great comedic timing.
Rival.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That That was Vice President J.D. Vance voting Secretary of State Marco Rubio as the second funniest member of the cabinet. Let's delve into some of the main stories on tomorrow's front pages. So I think we have them. American President Donald Trump has hosted Syria's President al-Shara at the White House. Take a look at this interaction between the two leaders.
This is men's fragrance. Yeah. This is what. No. It's the best fragrance. Come here, man. I have more here, sir. Okay. So what we'll do is just take that, Joe, put it in, and then the other one is for your wife. How many wives? Your wife. You guys I never know, right?
So he said, you can have one perfume and take another one for your wife. And then he said, how many wives have you got? And he said, just one. He went, you can never tell with you guys. You were appalled by that, Laurie.
Appalled.
It's hilarious.
As a person who does a lot of work in the Middle East, I was appalled, yeah.
Why?
Culturally, you don't, the president doesn't say things like that.
Oh, the president can say what he wants. If I was the president,
I
would be saying inappropriate things all the time. But that is...
He's known for inappropriate.
It's the elephant in the room. He's right with you guys. You never know. They laughed at it. They thought it was funny. That is what good, honest, open transparency and diplomacy looks like, surely.
He's the most transparent president perhaps ever, and it's very refreshing, you know, and it might offend people, but it's very refreshing, and you know, I thought it was funny. I too do a ton of business in the Middle East, and I assure you the people I do business with would not be offended by that.
Well, let's talk to Steve Allen in London, who is a comedian, of course, Steve N. Allen. Steve, I thought it was hilarious. It's exactly the kind of thing I want to, well, often do say, in company, which gets me into a bit of trouble. But, you know, the human beings have to find reasons to laugh at these things, and particularly in that when he says, you never know with you guys how many wives you might have had. Brilliant.
I don't think he was offended. And I think that should be the important thing here. It's not about if some third party is offended on their behalf. We could play that game all day and then no one gets to say anything ever. There's a whiff of the Prince Philip about it, isn't it? Having one of those high-level meetings and just saying the thing that really everyone thinks, oh, you shouldn't say that. But actually, as long as you've not offended the person you've said it to, then it's kind of all right. I don't think any harm was meant by it. And maybe we should be judging things on their intention rather than some third party's sense of effect.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think if Keir Starmer, Steve, could channel a little bit of that natural wit and banter rather than constantly worrying about what he's going to say to upset someone, that honesty would resonate with the public, and we just never see it from the Prime Minister, do we?
It's quite human, isn't it? There was a survey in the newspapers today, so it's yesterday's news, I suppose, by now, that the majority of people in the UK trust AI more than Keir Starmer, which is not great, is it? But when it comes to, you know, some mechanical, emotionless automaton, which one are you going to pick between AI and Keir Starmer? That's the problem. That little bit of humour shows that you're a human just trying to bond. In fact, that's probably why we developed it. No one really knows why humans have got this sense of humour, but the fact that we're social animals probably is the reason. You have a joke with someone, you have a bit of bants, as we say, on this side of the pond, and it kind of helps with the bonding.
Yeah, it does. Right, Laurie, I'm still interested in the fact that you were appalled by that. Like, but you seem like a woman who likes to laugh.
Sure, it's not about that. It was also, I believe, that he was peddling, once again, you know, Donald Trump never doubt that he's going to try to sell one of his products. And that was what it was. Oh, let me give this to you. Let me show it on camera. Whatever. You can laugh at it. It was a funny moment, I guess you could say, but... Yeah.
Was it his own perfume?
Saying you guys, like lumping all Middle Eastern men into the fact that they have multiple wives, that was what I got offended
Well, they often do.
As a woman.
But yeah, but when he says you guys, he probably means the people that I have in my office, these powerful Middle Eastern men that I have in the Oval Office. I'm never sure if you've got 1, 2, 3 or 4 wives. He's right.
Yeah, and you'd think the feminazis would be supportive of a comment like that because they say it's so evil.
Are you a feminazi?
No,
Laurie?
I'm not suggesting
okay, good.
you are.
So okay, good. I'm glad to clear that up.
In general, like the true feminists amongst the viewers would be really thrilled that the president was in a funny way critical of the idea of having multiple wives at the same time.
Oh, so now he was saying it as being critical.
I think he was. I think he's. Well, yeah, and he's also on the products. I don't know whose product it was, but
I believe it was his. He just recently launched a perfume and a cologne.
And good for him.
Again, as the president of the United States, who's made over $1 billion while he's been in office and it hasn't even been a year.
And he does it in a very transparent way, as opposed to the last administration that did it through multiple webs of LLCs.
Because he's the most transparent president of all time, right?
No, he's very transparent.
He's transparent about being ridiculous and being a grifter.
I don't think he's denying that he's selling perfume, but I think there's a little scar tissue here, because the last administration was getting paid by our adversaries, the Chinese, the Russians, the Ukrainians, Kazakhstan,
but okay.
And going into a web of private LLCs, so they couldn't follow the paper trail, and they finally were busted.
Here we go.
How much did? Well, Hunter Biden is sort of not funny, but how much did Joe Biden make when he was in office? Do we know?
Zero. Show me otherwise.
Well, that's not.
Prove to me otherwise, Bev. How much did he make?
That's why I asked you. I will go and have a look.
How would I know? The answer is zero.
But you know how much Donald Trump has made.
Because it's been widely reported by multiple news sources across the entire world.
Because he's transparent about it.
And he brags about it, right? Now Biden, we don't know how many millions, but we know it was 40,000.
No one cares about the Hatch Act. No one cares about the Constitution. No one cares about laws.
10%. Oh, sorry about the feminazi comment. I just meant, I thought that there would be some support.
You mean a feminist zealot? Yeah. We apologise if anybody was offended by that.
Excuse me. But $40,000 that we know about went into the bank account. 10% for the big guy. So $400,000 goes into his brother's account. And then the next day, $40,000 goes into Joe's account. So that's only $40,000.
And is he being transparent about all the money that he's pushed over to crypto?
I think
totally
he's been very transparent.
That's not transparent either, because how much is it?
Totally transparent.
How much is it then, Greg?
I have no idea.
See?
But
that's cool, right?
Well, no, because he's transparent about everything he does. And so, look, he's a businessman, and I don't think he's embarrassed about it.
He's the president of the United States. He's not a businessman. He is the president and leader of our nation.
I think we can all agree he's constantly promoting the products of the United States as well.
Perfume that he makes money off of is not a product of the United States.
Drill, baby, drill.
Let's bring in Stephen in London, Steve and Alan in London about this, because, Steve, I find this conversation really fascinating about whether the leader of a country should be allowed to make money, to profit effectively from their position, because I feel like if you are just at least transparent about what it is that you are investing in or that you're making money from as a leader of a country, as long as you're transparent about it, I've sort of become all right about it, because the voters can decide at the next election whether they're happy with it or not. Whereas we know that we've had subsequent governments and people in number 10 literally stuffing suitcases full of cash before they went out of the door, eventually got kicked out and no one knew about it. And I'd much rather have the former than the latter.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, we've had such a problem with it that we've had some good regulation brought in. We went through that phase, it was decades ago now, showing my age, but cash for questions. Just that you could make money just by raising issues in the House of Parliament. And in theory, what we have now are people who make their money when they've stopped being Prime Minister. I mean, people like Boris Johnson, who makes a lot of money on the after-dinner circuit. I can't imagine that Keir Starmer will be earning that much money from public speaking, but again, maybe that's just my bias on that. But I prefer the way our system's meant to be. It's not working. I mean, he might get booked, but I don't think there'll be thrilling evenings of entertainment.
You might have to write him some after-dinner speeches, Steve. But that was, one of the things that I find so frustrating about the British system is that because you aren't allowed, you have to declare everything on your interests as an MP, Laurie. So you have to declare what you're being paid by a news channel or a brand or whatever it is, or your after-dinner speeches. That is public knowledge. But therefore, what happens is you have lots of MPs who are just feathering their future nests. And they're just waiting, and who knows what deals are being done behind the scenes, because then once they're out of government, they've already sowed the seeds. And we saw it in the pandemic. We saw, was it Jonathan Van Tam, who went off and got a big job at a drug company? The after-dinner speeches that the likes of Matt Hancock and all of those protagonists will be doing for those drug companies, they didn't have to take it then. They just waited until they went off into the horizon and there was no form of recourse. So the more I've thought about it, the more I'm on board with leaders making their money in a transparent way, shamelessly, if you like, because at least you know where you stand with them in that position. Shall we move on to, now, this is a funny story. Apple has announced the launch of what they're calling their digital ID. in the United States. They're promoting it as a way for users to create an ID in Apple Wallet using information from their passport and presenting it with security and privacy on an iPhone or an Apple Watch. It's set to roll out first in beta at TSA checkpoints at more than 250 airports. I don't have any idea what that sentence means, I can't lie. What does that mean, Greg?
Yeah,
first in beta at TSA checkpoints?
Yeah, there's a couple of different systems you can register for and pay a small fee for, $100 or so a year, to fast track through the security system at the airport. So many of us have already signed up for digital ID, even though we're philosophically opposed to it. But just by signing up for Clear or TSE Pre, we are digitally ID'd already.
But is this very different to the digital ID that we're trying to have forced upon us by the British government?
That's two different things, yes.
Thank you.
Because one is, as you said, Bev, forced by the government, so that's just Big Brother, whereas this is a convenience thing. And so I think, you can differentiate the two, but I do think, at some point, we all have to admit we are digitally ID'd. I walk through the airport at Heathrow, and I just look, you just look into the camera, and they run you through. So
there's your biometric ID.
Yeah, so it's a slippery slope, but there is still a big difference between a convenience and a government-enforced or government-imposed digital ID.
My worry, Steve, is that people will hear, oh, well, in America they've got digital ID, so it must be OK, we'll have it in the UK. It isn't digital ID. For anybody that doesn't know, you can have, if my parents, for instance, are watching, they'll have no idea what we're talking about now. We've gone to a different language. But you can have a wallet in your phone, can't you, that has your credit card in it, and it might have your store cards in it, etc. And now they're talking about you being able to put your driving licence in there or your passport, which means you can just swipe and you can show them. Do you know, I bought a bottle of wine at the supermarket today, and I had to do that because I don't automatically walk around with ID in my pocket because I'm British and I have to explain it every time I go to buy a bottle of wine, which is frankly every day at the moment. I'm joking. But what I did do was show them a photograph of my passport, and I said, oh, I'm very sorry, I'm British, I don't walk with my ID, but here's my passport. And she had to go to get the manager of the shop to go and see if I could buy this bottle of wine. They did go, oh, it's her again, is it? No, but my point is, that isn't the same as digital ID. And I'm really worried, Steve, that this idea that Apple providing digital ID is going to get very confused with the messaging in Brits, and we don't want it.
Yeah, and what I like about that story is you've managed to tell everyone that someone thought you were under 21 today. We get it, you moisturise, you look great.
Take it as a compliment.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right at the moment. There is a world of difference at the moment between the convenience channel of having digital ID and the government enforced one. The problem is they end up in the same place. So while it's different at the moment, forcing people to do it or giving people the choice of would you want the hard work where you have to wait to get the manager, you have the longer queue, you have all the worst versions of everything, or you could have this thing on your phone. Give us a couple of decades at the very least and we'll all end up being in exactly the same place where everything is done on your phone, and if you don't have a phone, you don't get to take part in society.
Yeah, and Apple is a global company, and so please don't anyone believe that it's just going to stop at the shores of the U.S. Like, it's going to go global.
Yeah.
They are going to try to market this everywhere around the world.
Yeah, this is very true, although I have to say we have a generation of very conservative-minded teens coming up behind us who are very much rebelling against the idea of being controlled by the state or private companies. So I think we might have a backlash on this. Actually, I've got my fingers crossed that we do. I think we might have a generation of kids who've been so sick of watching their parents on their phones that they will decide they're going to go out of the house without one. Right, moving on, talking of children, high blood pressure in children has nearly doubled because of unhealthy diets, inactivity and soaring obesity, according to a global review. Experts have said that 114 million children who had developed hypertension before reaching adulthood were facing potentially deadly and lifelong harm, including cardiovascular problems, kidney disease, etc. Laurie, let me come to you. This is so depressing, isn't it, that we're letting down our young children like this?
It is, and I point a lot of it to policies within schools, things being taken away like activities, recess, etc., but also the problems with the food system, that it is filled with crap. You all in Europe have much different standards and regulations that we have here. RFK Jr. is trying on one front, I will agree with him, by trying to remove dyes and bad products that are in a lot of the prepackaged food here in the United States and going towards some of those standards that you all have over in the UK. So I agree with that. But in general, kids are dealing with a lot more stress. They are dealing with school stress. They are dealing with, here in the United States, I can say about school shootings, being made to, have active shooter drills, things like that I, as a child growing up in the United States, I never, ever had to deal with, never thought about for a second. So I think that's also contributing as a factor.
Yeah, Greg, it's so depressing. Rates of high blood pressure in the under-19s in 2020, 6.2%, and it was only 3% 20 years before that.
Yeah, I'm surprised I made it to 50. Growing up on the processed food, and it's only gotten worse. I don't think it was as bad in the 60s and 70s, but I agree with Lori. It's just there's so much poison in the food that is marketed as good food and good and healthy food, and it's just not true. So good for RFK for bringing that.
Yeah, and Steve, what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, yeah, you have to look at the food industry, which is entirely based on selling us stuff that we want to eat, not what's good for us. And that makes sense. You've got to realise they want the profits. And if you give people food that tastes good rather than is good, they'll do well. But the activity side of it just breaks my heart, because I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and basically both of them just want to move all the time. How have we got into a situation where kids, all they want to do is move, and we end up giving them an inactive lifestyle that ruins their health? How?
I know, it's appalling, isn't it? Thank you guys so much. Steve and Alan in London, thank you very much. You know what I have noticed here is that your food does not go off. Doesn't go off. I've had loaves of bread that I bought at the end of August. They've not got a bit of mould on them. It's a mystery.
Because of all those preservatives.
We will deal with
that. 10-year shelf life.
We'll deal with that another night. Ben Leo's going to be here tomorrow night, midnight in the UK. Sleep well.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through today there'll be a bit of a three-way split when it comes to our weather. Cold in the north with a few wintry showers, very mild with a lot of fine weather across southern parts. In between, however, it's a much wetter story. Some persistent and quite heavy rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England through this morning. The rain breaking up and easing a little bit as we head into the afternoon. Across Scotland, like I say, there will be some showers around, could be falling as sleet or snow, but also some sunny spells. A chilly feel here though, temperatures struggling. Meanwhile, across central and southern England, well, lots of fine sunny weather to be had and temperatures well above average for the time of year, feeling, well, relatively warm in the sunshine for some. As we go into the evening, sticking with the chilly feel across parts of Scotland, a bit of frost developing quite quickly as we go overnight, and also a few more showers, some still falling as sleet or snow. Across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, staying pretty cloudy. There will be a few outbreaks of rain at times as well, not as heavier as they will have been during the daytime. And then further south, well, central parts of England and Wales ending the day largely fine, but rain persistent and heavy pushing into some southern counties and then feeding further northwards as we go overnight. Now, it is going to be quite heavy. We could see some rainfall totals building up for some places, but across the northern half of the UK, staying drier with some clearer skies across parts of Scotland, so temperatures dropping even further. Could get as low as -4, -5 Celsius in some places, much milder where we have the cloud and rain further south. That rain's going to continue then for many places across England and Wales as we go through tomorrow. It could be quite heavy, particularly across the hills and mountains towards the south of Wales. High rainfall totals, perhaps up to 100 millimetres, could cause some impacts, particularly around some east-facing slopes. Further north, staying bright and fine, just a few showers to watch out for. Chilly here, much milder towards the south, but unpleasant in the wind and rain.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.